Good morning, 5th grade. Today we're going to continue reading Chapter 13 in Esperanza Rising. Before we get started, we want you to complete this fill-in-the-blank summary from Chapters 11 and 12. Esperanza learned at dinner that there were a lot of deportations, especially the Mexicans. Miguel mentioned that the strikers would find their way back to the United States. Esperanza worried about whether Marta had made it home safely. The next morning, she and Miguel drove past Marta's old camp. It was completely abandoned. Esperanza prays for Marta along with the members of her family. She discovers that Isabel is praying to be chosen as the queen of the 3rd grade. However, Esperanza learns that the teacher always chooses a white girl, even if she doesn't have the best grades. Esperanza knows that Isabel will be disappointed. Press pause to write down your answers, or you can go back and rewind if you missed a blank. Our focus question for today is, how does Esperanza respond to Miguel in Chapter 13? Is this what we would expect from her? Why or why not? Our vocabulary words are barracks. That's a group of buildings that can house a large number of people, kind of like an apartment, except it's longer instead of higher. Irrigation, that's watering plants. And second-class citizen. That is a group of people in a country who don't have the same rights as another group of people. All right, as we're reading Chapter 13, we're going to complete our CSPS strategy. And I'm going to summarize the first section and then start reading in the second section. So this talks about how Esperanza prays a lot, and as she's praying one night, Isabel comes out and explains to her how she wants her to pray for her because she wants to be the Queen of May. And in 2 weeks, her teacher will choose the queen, and she feels like she has a good chance because she's making straight A's. And then she asks, but Josefina asks, has a Mexican girl ever been chosen Queen of May? Or is Esperanza asked Josefina, and Josefina said, no, they always choose a white girl. And Esperanza's like, that's not fair. And Josefina's like, well, that's kind of the way it is. Like, people don't treat other people fairly. Okay, so we're going to keep reading in the second section using our CSPS strategy. A week later, Esperanza put yet another bundle of asparagus on the table after work. The tall and feathery asparagus plants seemed to be as unrelenting as Isabel's desire to be queen. The workers picked the spheres from the fields, and a few days later the same fields had to be picked again because new shoots were already showing their heads. And Isabel talked of nothing else except the possibility of wearing the winner's crown of flowers on her head. I hate asparagus, said Isabel, barely looking up from her homework. During grapes, you hate grapes. During potatoes, you hate potatoes. And during asparagus, you hate asparagus. I suppose during peaches, you will hate peaches. Isabel laughed. No, I love peaches. Hortensia stirred a pot of beans, and Esperanza took off the stained apron she wore in the sheds and put on another. She began measuring the flour to make tortillas. In a few minutes, she was patting the fresh dough that left her hands looking as if she wore white gloves. My teacher will choose the Queen of May this week, said Isabel. Her entire body wiggled with excitement. Yes, you've told us, said Esperanza, teasing her. Do you have anything new to tell us? They are making a new camp for people from Oklahoma, said Isabel. Esperanza looked at Hortensia. Is that true? Hortensia nodded. They announced it at the camp meeting. The owner of the farm bought some army barracks from an old military camp and is moving them onto the property not too far from here. They get inside toilets and hot water and a swimming pool, said Isabel. Our teacher told us all about it, and we will be able to swim in it. 1 day a week, said Hortensia, looking at Esperanza. The Mexicans can only swim on Friday afternoons because they clean the pool on Saturday mornings. Esperanza pounded the dough a little too hard. Do they think we are dirtier than the others? Hortensia did not answer, but turned to the stove to cook a tortilla on the flat black comal over a flame. She looked at Esperanza and held her finger to her mouth, signaling her not to discuss too much in front of Isabel. We'll stop right there. Let's describe the character. Esperanza is helping Hortensia around the house, and she's working out in the fields during asparagus season. And Isabel is hoping she can be Queen of May. Press pause to write down your answer in box 1, and we will choose a quote. Let's see. Isabel says they're going to choose Queen of May this week. And at the beginning, it talks about how, Esperanza put another bundle of asparagus on the table. So you can use those quotes for box 1. Press pause to write down your answer in box 1 and play when you're ready for the setting. We know that Hortensia, Isabel, and Esperanza are in the cabin making dinner. And you can use this quote. I'll put it in green. You can use this green quote in box 2. All right, and Esperanza has hinted at the problem. There, a bunch of people from Oklahoma are moving to the area, and they get, cabins that have inside toilets and hot water and a swimming pool. And when you think about Esperanza's camp, they don't have indoor toilets. They have to heat up their water because they don't have running hot water. And they most definitely do not have a pool. So it sounds like the cabins for the white people from Oklahoma are going to be a lot nicer than the cabins that the Mexican immigrants have to live in. And this is on the same farm with the same owner. So he's purposely giving the white people from Oklahoma better living conditions, even though they have not even started working there, and he's not sure if they're going to work as hard as the Mexicans who have been working there. All right, and so when we're thinking about how to name this problem, when you treat one group of people better than another group of people just because of the color of their skin, we would call that discrimination, or we would call that racism. And so we could say, Esperanza and her family are experiencing discrimination from the farm owner because the new white families from Oklahoma are getting better living conditions than the Mexican immigrants. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. Okay, and you can use this quote for the problem when she's talking about the hot water. Or you can use this quote from Esperanza when she finds out they can't swim in the swimming pool. They can only swim in it on Fridays because they're going to drain the water on Saturdays. She has this quote, do they think we are dirtier than the others? That's probably a better quote. All right, and so we're going to continue reading at the bottom of the page. It might not be the bottom of your page, the bottom of this page. Miguel walked in, kissed his mother, then picked up a plate and a fresh tortilla and went to the pot of beans. His clothes were covered in mud that had dried gray. "How did you get so dirty?" asked Hortensia. Miguel sat down at the table. A group of men showed up from Oklahoma. They said they would work for half the money, and the railroad hired all of them. He looked into his plate and shook his head. "Some of them have never even worked on a motor before. My boss said that he didn't need me, that they were going to train the new men. He said I could dig ditches or lay tracks if I wanted." Esperanza stared at him, her flower hands in midair. "What did you do? Can you not tell from my clothes? I dig ditches." His voice was sharp, but he continued eating as if nothing were wrong. "Miguel, how could you agree to such a thing?" said Esperanza. Miguel raised his voice. "What would you have me do instead? I could have walked out, but I would have no pay for today. Those men from Oklahoma have families too. We must all work at something or we will all starve." A temper Esperanza did not recognize raged to the surface. Then, like the irrigation pipes in the fields, when the water is first turned on, her anger burst forth. "Why didn't you tell your boss to tell the others to dig ditches?" She looked at the dough she was holding in her hand and threw it at the wall. It stuck for an instant and then slid down the wall, leaving a darkened trail. Isabel's serious eyes darted from Miguel to Esperanza to Hortensia. "Are we going to starve?" "No!" they all answered at the same time. Esperanza's eyes were on fire. She stamped out of the cabin, slamming the door, and walked past the mulberry and chinnaberry trees to the vineyard. She hurried down a row and then cut over to another. "Esperanza!" She heard Miguel's voice in the distance, but she didn't answer. When she got to the end of one row, she moved up to the other. "Anza!" She could hear him running down the rows, catching up with her. She kept her eyes on the tamarisk trees in the far distance and walked faster. Miguel eventually caught her arm and pulled her around. "What is the matter with you? Is this the better life that you left Mexico for? Is it? Nothing is right here. Isabel will certainly not be queen, no matter how badly she wants it, because she's Mexican. You cannot work on engines because you are Mexican. We have gone to work through angry crowds of our own people who threw rocks at us, and I'm afraid they might have been right. They send people back to Mexico even if they don't belong there, just for speaking up. We live in a horse stall, and none of this bothers you? Have you heard that they are building a new camp for Okies with a swimming pool, and Mexicans can only swim in it in the afternoon before they clean it? Have you heard they will be given inside toilets and hot water? Why is that, Miguel? Is it because they are the fairest in the land? Tell me, is this life really better than being a servant in Mexico?" Miguel looked out over the grapes, where the sun set low on the horizon, casting long shadows in the vineyard. He turned back to her. "In Mexico, I was a second-class citizen. I stood on the other side of the river, remember? And I would have stayed that way my entire life. At least here I have a chance, however small, to become more than what I was. You obviously can never understand this because you have never lived without hope." Ooh. Miguel is so right. You underline this. That was really important. She clenched her fist and closed her eyes tight in frustration. "Miguel, do you not understand? You are still a second-class citizen because you act like one, letting them take advantage of you like that. Why don't you go to your boss and confront him? Why don't you speak up for yourself and your talents?" All right, I'm about to run out of time. Read the rest of this paragraph and write down the solution of how Esperanza confronts